Hi, it's Jen again, and this week I wanted to talk about something a little different than what I normally would do. It's not often that I give my opinion or thoughts when it comes to other stories and media out there, but I recently watched The Promised Neverland and read the manga, and I had a lot of thoughts about it. One of the things that I love about this story and characters, especially in the first arc. Oh, I should probably preface by saying this video is going to have a lot of spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then I'll see you next week, hopefully. Okay, let me move on. The first arc with the Gracefield orphanage. I don't know if it's because I'm adopted that I always have a soft spot for like orphan stories, but here we are. That's one way to always like tug on my heartstrings. One thing that I really enjoyed about the first arc in particular was this kind of game that was between the children and the adults. And I think a lot of times as a parent, and just interacting with my child and getting a lot of unsolicited parenting advice from other parents, or, other well-meaning people, is that I think people forget sometimes what their childhood was like, what it's really like to be a child. And you could look back with nostalgia and say, oh, it was so nice being a child because I didn't have all the adult responsibilities and worries that I have today. I disagree with that personally, and I don't think I had a particularly terrible childhood in the sense that I was provided for, I was shown love and taken care of and given a safe place and had all my needs taken care of. I really have no complaints about that, and I think my parents did the best they could with the knowledge that they had at the time. With that said, even the most perfect childhood, I think I would still struggle, me personally, because childhood to me was a lack of agency, a lack of power, and a lack of voice, where you're surrounded by adults who tell you what you're supposed to think and convince you that you are, you just need to trust them and rely on them and they will take care of you, which is true for the most part, but not having that power over your own, to make the decisions for yourself, to be able to take care of yourself, which I'm not saying that children should be able to do that. But for me, it was deeply frustrating. And I don't know if that's because I might have had attachment issues due to my relinquishment, that I very stubbornly did not want to give up any agency and fully trust the adults in my life to provide for me. But regardless, that is a lot of what I think of when I think of my childhood. I remember just so passionately waiting for the day that I could be an adult, that I could leave the house, that I could be on my own. And of course, adulthood has its own share of complications, but for me it meant emancipation. It meant being able to truly pursue and be who I wanted to be without fear of judgment. And a judgment where my safety and my well-being could potentially be at stake. We'd like to think that all parents love their children unconditionally, but we know that that is not guaranteed to everyone. And I think especially being a child who's already experienced relinquishment, it doesn't matter what reasons you give that child, that they were given up, or that their original biological parents could not take care of them, in that child's heart, in their subconscious, they are always going to feel like they were abandoned, because that is just kind of the biological priming. And you can post-rationalize it as much as you want, but those feelings are still going to be there, and it's going to make it difficult. At least for me, it made it difficult for me to trust other people. And so in The Promised Neverland, I really related a lot to Ray and Norman, in the sense that they wanted what was good, for everyone. But especially Ray, he didn't see how it was possible. And it really took things getting out of his control for things to be resolved in a way that didn't require even more sacrifice. And it was kind of Emma's optimism and her trust in others, her drive for solidarity, even with those who could be a detriment, a burden, or had been, enemies in the past, or, posed a threat. She wanted to trust people and extend that solidarity to as many as possible. And that is something that you don't see a lot in modern media. A lot of modern media is centered around kind of a hero or heroic group of very exceptional people. And those exceptional people kind of save all the non-exceptional people. And it's through their individual talent and strength and courage that, that heroic deeds and good deeds are accomplished. But very rarely do we see people actually trusting and empowering those who are unremarkable, those who are weak, those who are flawed, those who have very ambiguous morality. We are kind of taught to guard ourselves against that type of weakness of depending, not just empowering and enabling, and encouraging people who are weaker to be stronger, but I mean actually relying on them, believing that they could actually do as much as you can do, or even more, or even better, given the opportunity. Rarely do we ever see that type of trust and solidarity in storytelling. And at least here, where I am in America, where rugged individualism is always glorified. So I think that there's a lot of messages in The Promised Neverland. I'm going to talk about the manga, that the idea level I'm really interested in, and it provoked a lot of thoughts, and I have a lot to say about it. And the execution, especially towards the end, definitely feels kind of rushed, and I know a lot of fans have complaints about that. But it didn't really bother me that much, because I genuinely felt moved by the messages that the story was trying to tell, that I felt that the creator was trying to convey. So the flaws in the execution didn't bother me at all. I think I'm going to go back to one of my previous videos where I talked about metamodernism or postmodernism, where there is kind of that very cynical, cautious optimism. And I think towards the end of The Promised Neverland, it kind of abandoned that cautious optimism, that optimism that's very tempered and self-sufficient. And it just was kind of unapologetically just optimistic. Like, it kind of felt more like, probably like very, very simple and unrealistic solutions to things that seemed kind of impossible and systemic, deeply embedded systemic issues. And that's kind of the stakes, of the whole series, was that you are kind of brought out of this microcosm of this conflict that's just between the children and the adults at the orphanage, and eventually then you realize it's more like the children versus the demons, and then you realize that it's more like it's the children are, maybe could be considered even more just like humanity and the demons, all life, kind of versus these institutionalized power structures that kind of cause suffering at every level. Even those who seem to benefit from these unequal, imbalanced power structures the most, even those who seem to benefit the most from it, have their own form of suffering. So how do you challenge something that's so deeply embedded, so out of control? And I feel that the story overall was trying to speak to a kind of uncompromising optimism of solidarity, this idea that it would be possible, to have this type of utopian solidarity that included everyone, including those who, were enemies in the past. And yeah, it feels very unrealistic, but I think the message is, I think sometimes we need a more optimistic, uncompromising message that, if we really are ever as a species going to strive for well-being of everyone, it has to do that. It has to include everyone. Otherwise, you're always going to have conflict and strife, and that may be unavoidable. That might be just part of our condition at a biological level of tribalism, But it does make you wonder, what could we accomplish if we could just get past all that? Because I believe in the common, well-being of my fellow living beings, that we want, and this for the same things at the end of the day. Just like the children in the Promised Neverland. I showed my son the first season. He is 8 years old. We watched it together. And I would like for him to eventually explore the rest of the story, but I think he's not ready yet. But the first season, I think, was actually the perfect blend of suspense and high stakes that a child could become very invested in without having kind of the kind of stereotypical, objectification that a lot of anime has, a lot of the fan service. I don't have a problem necessarily with fan service, but I think it's a little inappropriate for a son my age. Someone that's my son's age. I would rather not be, exposing him to all that right now. But he has always liked kind of more ambiguous morality. He's always liked complex villains that have a sympathetic side to them. He's always liked things that are a little bit dark without being gory. And so I feel like this story was kind of perfect for him in that regards. And I've seen a lot of discussion online with parents and viewers who believe that it's more mature rating, but I personally disagree. I think that children should be challenged with darker, heavier themes, and should be challenged with morally ambiguous situations, scenarios, so that they have the safe environment to explore these themes and under, the guidance of their parents. Hopefully, if they have any questions or they feel confused about something, you can start having discussions about these things when they're young, so that they won't be so easily indoctrinated or be so quick to form opinions without consideration. And so I like to show him these types of more complicated stories. And I guess probably it's my own personal bias because these are the types of things that I like to watch without my parents knowing when I was his age. Well, those are my thoughts. I have a lot more to say about it, but that's where I'm going to end today. I hope you all had a good Labor Day weekend and enjoy yourselves, enjoy the process. And if you haven't seen The Promised Neverland, I'm surprised you watched this video all the way through, but I'm also a person who doesn't care about spoilers, so I believe that the execution is good enough that even after having it spoiled, you should go watch it. I highly recommend it. All right, take care. Bye.